I'm Bob with STA-BIL.
And I'm DJ with 303. Welcome to episode 2, our modification of this 2003 350Z.
We're showing just how affordable taking on a project car can be, turning this 03 350Z into a fun daily driver / weekend track car. We set ourselves a $25,000 budget all in. The car purchase, parts, insurance, all for $25 grand. So far we've inspected the car, cleaned it up a bit, took off the wheels, the front bumper, the air intake, and the exhaust. Today we'll be taking off the intake plenum, replacing a leaky valve cover, and finally putting on some fun new parts.
Those include a plenum spacer, a cold air intake, a larger throttle body, swapping out a leaky valve cover, and we're going to change the spark plugs and coil packs while we have plenty of space.
Now that you have an idea of what we'll be working on, we're going to get the rest of these parts taken off so we can get the new parts put in place.
To make room for all the new parts, we're removing the throttle body, upper intake plenum, plenum gasket, lower intake plenum, valve cover, coil packs, and spark plugs.
These Z cars, they're notorious for having misfires due to faulty valve cover gaskets. In some vehicles, the valve cover has separate gaskets around the spark plug holes that are easily replaceable. Well, of course, Nissan didn't want this to be easy on us. On these cars, the spark plug gaskets are all one on the valve cover, meaning that if one starts leaking, you have to replace the entire thing, which is what we're about to do. While we're here taking everything apart, we are going to do some basic maintenance by replacing our spark plugs and coil packs. That way we know everything is good to go once we get it all back together.
This will require us to use a basic socket set along with a ratchet. When installing the new valve cover, we'll need some RTV sealant to make sure we don't have any leaks. We're using the piece of cardboard over the lower intake so nothing falls into the engine, so we don't have to rip it apart.
We ended up using the STA-BIL carbon choke cleaner because it's also a great parts cleaner. We were able to remove all the carbon buildup inside of the intake plenum while we had it apart. That way we don't have to rip it apart later and go back and maybe do it again or something goes wrong, so we know everything's clean as it goes back together.
The plenum spacer is going to let the car breathe a bit easier. It helps increase airflow from cylinders, which is robbed from the factory design, and will allow us to get more top-end power and a little bit more mid-range torque. Best part is, it'll allow us to keep our factory strut tower brace as well.
The tools needed to install the plenum spacer are just a 10mm socket, a 14mm socket, a 3/8 ratchet, and some extensions. Whenever you're installing anything that uses bolts, especially with a car, it's best practice to install in a crisscross pattern to make sure the pressure is even on all sides. So this throttle body is the link between our new plenum spacer and our new cold air intake, which we'll be putting on in a few minutes. The air intake is initially where the air starts flowing into the engine. It then passes through the throttle body. With this being 5mm larger than stock, this is going to allow more airflow down into the cylinders that we just made more space with the plenum spacer we installed. In return, this should give us a greater throttle response and a slight increase in power.
All systems go.
Adding this cold air intake is going to do just that. Allow the engine to suck in cooler air from outside the engine bay. The mandrel bent tubing and open filter allows the air to flow smoothly into the new throttle body and then down into our intake plenum, creating a cleaner combustion process as the cooler air is more efficient than the hot air that was being pulled in from the old intake. So just like last episode, 303 protectant came in clutch again. helping us install the silicone connectors on the cold air intake. They added some extra lubrication so we could move things easier when it all came together.
When installing the cold air intake, we started at the top. This way we could work from the throttle body down and make sure everything lines up and fits the way it was supposed to.
One thing to keep in mind when you're doing any type of card build is to do it the way that you want it. I'm sure there's gonna be a ton of comments below talking about we should have added this or we should have added that. Everything we put on there had a purpose for our own intents of the build. So make sure that you're just kind of doing your own research, looking at what you want to put on there, and everything is a purpose for a car build, so make it your own.
Okay, that wraps up what we had time for today. Next episode, we're going to be adding some suspension modifications, throwing on some new brakes and rotors, and we're also going to be painting the calipers.
For more on this car build or the latest on what's happening with STA-BIL and 303, make sure to follow both on Instagram and Facebook. Hit the subscribe button at the end of the video.
Thanks for watching.